Good morning, nerds. It is I. Tabletop RPGs are all about stories. Whether they range from grand epic narratives that run from the beginning to the end of a campaign, or these small slices of life that come up here and there. And in this video, we will be exploring the second. I'm going to discuss environmental storytelling, and how it can be used to enrich your campaign and your game world. So, if you like putting fun little hints for your players here and there, sit down, buckle up, and have your passive perception scores at the ready. You will be needing them. But before we go any further, please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell for notifications to find the hidden narrative that runs through all these videos. The first thing we need to do here is establish what environmental storytelling is. Environmental storytelling, in a very literal sense, is storytelling through the environment. It's using clues, small objects, hints here and there to convey information to the players that would otherwise have to be exposited. Now, I would like to distinguish an environmental storytelling feature from a clue. A clue is used to drive the story forward in a very clear, direct way. Environmental storytelling, while it can impact the story, doesn't have to, and the story can usually proceed as planned even if it isn't noticed. These are bonus features. Clues, meanwhile, because they are often essential to the progression of the story, in fact you need to do a whole video on investigative adventures to really do them justice. So, beyond that, what makes an environmental storytelling feature? As noted earlier, it is incidental. It's something that the PCs probably aren't looking for intentionally, but will stumble across. It might be out in the open, or it could be hidden away. That is entirely up to you. Whenever people talk about environmental storytelling in video games, they always bring up the Bethesda skeletons on toilets in Fallout. Now, I've never played a Fallout game, so I'm told they exist. I'm going to go look on the internet for pictures of them existing, and if I find one, I will put it here. However, for tabletop RPGs, I do have some other examples. Throughout this video, there will be small spoilers for Curse of Strahd. I will warn you each time. This is the first. You can jump forward about 30 seconds if you don't want spoilers. In the starting village of Barovia, which I renamed to Barovo to distinguish it from the entire campaign region, there is a place called the Blood of the Vine Tavern. It's not a particularly interesting location in my experience. When I ran that campaign, we visited it maybe once or twice, but there is one little detail on the sign. If you look closely, you will see that it used to say Blood on the Vine, but the N was changed to an F. It's a fun little detail, and there are plenty more like it in Curse of Strahd, including some that I added myself, which we will get to later on. The next thing to consider with a good environmental storytelling feature is that it should reveal something about the world. For instance, I once had a cyberpunk adventure take place in a former convenience store that had been converted into a gang hideout. Now, as the party was sneaking through the back entrance, they came to a door with an old torn sticker on it, which said staff on toilet. Now, the reason it said that is because the LY from staff only toilet had been torn off. How very convenient. It's not a consequential detail for that adventure in any way, shape or form, but it does help give a sense of what this building used to be. And yes, they did check inside, although I can't remember if they actually used the facilities. In fact, I don't think they did. I think they jumped directly to murdering Shrip the storeroom goblin, which, how terrible of them.
How dare you!
You tell them, Greta. Finally, in my experience, a good environmental storytelling feature is in some way incomplete. There is some step that the players need to figure out to really get its potential. The one time that I think I pulled this off the best, again, comes from Curse of Strahd. So again, spoiler warning, you may want to jump forward. So, the party had been stuck in Vallaki for far too bloody long. Getting sick of them trying to repeat the vampire spawn encounter over and over and over again, I decided to have Strahd set the whole of Vallaki on fire. And boy did that make things heat up. The party, along with the town's entire population, was forced to flee west. And after a bit of dicking around, visiting some other locations, they came to the village of Kresk. Now, Within the base adventure material, which bear in mind the Burning of Lucky is not in the adventure anywhere, I added that, but in the base adventure, Kresk is noted as being very suspicious of outsiders and doing everything they can to not piss off Strahd so that he will leave them alone. So, the party, who had got a bunch of Wallachian refugees in tow, show up to the gates of Kresk and treat with the Burgomaster, who was standing atop the village walls. He seemed initially reticent, but after a bit of bargaining regarding the Wizard of Wine's winery, he agreed to let in the refugees. And so the party were feeling pretty chuffed with themselves and set up camp for the evening. And as they did, they noticed a few details about the surroundings of the village. There were a lot of bones and bits of torn clothing that seemed to have been gnawed upon by animals, wolves, ravens, the like. Furthermore, there were a whole bunch of crossbow bolts lying around, which was very helpful for the one crossbow-focused fighter who had lost all his crossbow bolts to a fall, which is a story unto itself. So the party got to musing as I sat there watching them intently. They realised that the village of Kresk were very obviously suspicious of refugees, that there were a whole bunch of bodies around, and a whole bunch of crossbow bolts to boot. It didn't take them long to realise that the villagers had murdered a bunch of refugees to keep them getting into the village, and when that realization hit them, it hit them. Given their own previous encounters with Strahd, and the very understandable fear of him that the villagers of Kresk have, they couldn't really blame them that much, but it really did serve to just hammer home the darkness of that setting. For most of the time that I ran Curse of Strahd, being a bit of an inexperienced GM and not really knowing how to handle horror that well, it mostly came off as something of an action slasher campaign. And while that certainly did work for my players and I, the campaign ultimately was not nearly as dark as it could have been. But in that moment, oh was it dark. And spoiler time over. So, now that we've talked about what environmental storytelling is, let's talk about how to employ it. As I said, environmental storytelling should not be a key clue. These should be small details that the players find here and there that help expand the world in some small way. The best time to consider environmental storytelling is during prep, in my experience, when you're filling out the details of whatever environment your adventure is taking place in. That could be a dungeon, a fantasy town, a futuristic apartment building, a spaceship. It could be anywhere. The question that you need to ask yourself as you're putting in the essential details, the NPCs, the traps, the loot, the essential clues for investigation, the best question to ask yourself is, what else would be here, and what would that say about the world? For instance, if you're filling out an apartment for a cyberpunk game, someone lives in that apartment. They have belongings above and beyond what is needed for the adventure. So what are those things? Now, this could be something as simple as their spare clothes, but we can go a bit further. If you're playing, say, Cyberpunk Red or even Cyberpunk 2020 with relatively robust fashion rules, you have a whole bunch of clothing styles to pick from. That's a good starting point. But again, we can go further. Where are they stored? Are they tucked away in neat, organized drawers? Are they just dumped in a pile somewhere? Are they even clean? All of these things tell the players more about the person who lives in that apartment. In fact, let's say they put it in some drawers. What else is in there? Maybe there are old receipts for bars, shops, and other such places that they visited. Maybe there's a whole bunch of naughty items tucked away at the back where they hope no one would find them. My general technique is to start with what the most realistic items for you to find in an area are, and then work on ways to make that interesting. You can also mix in environmental storytelling details and investigative clues into the same area. In a recent Cyberpunk adventure for my current campaign, I had the players go rooting through the cube hotel room of a corporate mole in their town. Now, one of the clues that I had them find was his long disused agent. And while there certainly was some useful stuff in there, giving them some backstory on him, there were also a bunch of phone games on there. The Raid Shadow Legends of the Dark Future and whatnot. They had absolutely no bearing on the plot in any way, shape or form, nor did I expect them to. But you would expect someone who spent €100 on an agent to have a bit of fun with it. And so a bunch of free-to-play mobile games are just what I put on there. I did also put a piece of used woman's underwear that was tangled up in his bedsheets, but you can guess for yourself how that got there. Whenever you're choosing an object to use for environmental storytelling, do also consider the emotional impact that it will have. Something that just exists for the sake of existing is going to be boring and tedious. Not everything needs to give the players some deep sense of horror, the way that those bodies and crossbow bolts did from earlier. But they should still have some impact. They can be used to elicit sympathy, disgust, love, hatred, curiosity, amusement. If, while looting the corpse of the corporate assassin that you send after your players, they find a locket with a picture of their would-be assailant's wife and kids, that will make them feel pretty bad about killing that assassin. On the other hand, if you want your players to really hate some goblins in your fantasy adventure, just sprinkle some children's bones around their lair. Don't say how they got there, just say what they are, and let the players think through the rest. I really can't overstate how important it is to let your players figure out what these clues are for themselves. Put simply, if you tell them, it's exposition. If they realize it, then it's a realization. And a realization hits a whole hell of a lot harder than any lore dump ever can. Now, it may be tempting to drop hints to the players. I can be very tempted to do that myself, but do refrain as much as possible. And even if you do give the players a hint, you don't need to give them the whole thing. For instance, towards the end of my last campaign, my players found the tomb of the evil wight who had been trying to reconquer his old empire. Now, at the entrance to that tomb, there were 10 frescoes, 5 along each side of the entrance passageway. Now, my players started trying to read them completely out of order, and I perhaps not too subtly hinted to them that they were meant to be read in a kind of serpentine pattern. First on the left, first on the right, second on the right, second on the left, yada yada. Now, the final step that still had to happen was the players piecing together the life story, and understanding how the events progressed. It's maybe not a perfect example, but it was certainly better than me pointing out, hey, you got the order wrong, he started fancying that girl before he conquered his empire. I should give, however, one final note, and that is that sometimes, no matter what you do, the players won't figure out your clues, and even if they do, they won't care. It can be tempting as a GM to continuously hint to them until they get it, and I'm going to advise against doing that, even though I do kind of keep doing that myself. If this happens to you, just go, oh well, better luck next time, and move on. Environmental storytelling should not be an excuse for railroading, at all. So please don't treat it like it is. In conclusion, environmental storytelling is all about adding flavour to your adventures and to your world as a whole. The point here is not to drive the story forward, but to give your story more breadth. These techniques work best with groups and players who enjoy exploration, who enjoy rooting around for the little secrets that you sprinkle your world with. This won't work for every GM, and it won't work for every group of players. But if you do find a bunch of adventurers who enjoy finding these little details, it's a great low-effort way to add detail and make things more interesting and more nuanced in your campaigns. And it's a wrap. Thank you all so much for watching. A quick update on the large but painful video that I have coming up. I've completed the first phase of my preparations and now need to start structuring the video and hopefully have it recorded within the next couple of weeks. If you enjoyed this video though, then please like it, share it with your friends, and leave a comment down below. What environmental storytelling nuggets have you left for your players? Or, if you're a player, what little details have you found scattered about by your GM? Do let me know in the comment section down below. If you'd like to see more videos like this one, then please subscribe and hit the bell for notifications. It really does help the channel. Now, Audacity has been giving me its own little environmental storytelling cues about the need to remain fresh and up to date, in the form of giant pop-ups showing up whenever I open up the app to record these videos. So, I will finally be paying attention and updating Audacity yet again. Once more though, thank you all so much for watching, and until I see you next, farewell.